All right, so something I wanted to talk about in Guilty Gear Strive, seeing as this is a game that got a lot of people into fighting games and at the same time got a lot of people interested in macro commands. I wanted to talk specifically about the dash button in the game. So, obviously, the dash macro was made to help people who are on stick, I believe, compete with those on leverless and or pad devices. And while I think the effort is valiant, trying to get everyone on an even playing field, I think what it ends up doing is causing more harm than good in the sense of how fighting games used to be made. So what I mean by this is specifically a frame trap game. So for this example, I have Axel here. Matter of fact, give me one moment. So now that both my characters are Axel, in case you don't know how Axel works, his whole game plan revolves around frame trapping with Snail, and using the fear of getting frame trapped with Snail so that he can leave and create distance between you and him. So that's what Axel shipped with day one of the game. And so basically, the only way that you could hit Rainwater here is if you air dash after him. So you can see how one plays into the other. But with the ability to dash block at least a 2-frame gap, that becomes a lot harder to bait out. As example. So, what this means is that if you do it perfectly, which admittedly is very hard to do consistently, that means that your frame trap attempt is useless, and you can actually punish Axel from there, because on top of this, just not being plus, this is negative 24. In the past, and with past updates, they made it so that this move gives more pushback so you wouldn't get a really good punish. The issue with modern Strive, as in the version I'm playing now, I think it's 4, is that this game has Wild Assault. And with Wild Assault, that becomes a much more damaging, a much more damaging punish. So, with that being said, dash blocking does lose to Rainwater, if I can find my recording for it. So, as you can see, the gap, the distance between the two has increased significantly, and funnily enough, with the revision in what they had given Axel and Rainwater losing its vacuum effect, it's much more better for gaining space. The unfortunate thing with that is that Axel can't really take advantage of the plus frames mid-screen. He really just has to use it as a means of gaining space. In the corner, different story. You can actually do something about it, but other than that, not so much. But with that in mind, that means that regular dash blocking, technically perfect dash blocking, I guess, for lack of a better term, is able to beat 2 of Axel's moves, and this character relies heavily on frame trapping you to make you scared about chasing after him. What this means is that you can chase down Axel on the floor without any fear of him doing much of anything to you, considering the fact that you can't cancel a 2H into 6H in this game, and off of a 2P, that is where things change a bit, because this is a much harder gap to dash block at. You can do it, it's just very difficult to do it with no prompting whatsoever. Now, with all that being said, you can do something about your opponent dash blocking. You can change, you can change the areas where you're frame trapping. That way, it becomes a lot harder for them to predict and just mindlessly dash block at you. But due to the fact that Strive has limited Gatlings that you can go into, at some point you will arrive at a place where you have to end your strings with with something either very predictable or a button you don't want to end with necessarily, and that's when the dash blocking comes into effect. Now in my case, I play Axel, so this problem is much more pronounced. There we go. Is much more pronounced to me because he has so very little that he can do, plus this game having very little plus frames that it gives its characters, at least not without an asterisk with it, that I feel this problem a lot in my games that I play. But with that being said, this is not something that is just an Axel issue. This is something that affects the whole cast of Guilty Gear Strive. In fact, it was such a big problem that one of the changes they made for Leo was decreasing the amount of distance that he can actually dash block at you. If you ever wanted to see a character that manipulated, for lack of a better term, dash blocking, it was Leo, because he could just dash in your face for fun. He's building meter, he's charging his flash kick at the same time, and the only thing that you could have done about it was throwing them until they made DPs invincible. Again, frame trapping is an option for something like that. However, it's still difficult to get out most of the time when a perfect dash block, is about a 2-frame gap, give or take. Maybe it's 3 frames, but I know for a fact that it's not 4. Insert the footage of me, jumping versus the perfect dash block here. So, with all that being said, this is not so much a video to say why, Strive should take it out of the game. It's too late now. You're assuming you're a Guilty Gear Strive player, 4 seasons deep, you played with it this long, might as well keep it going. But I think this is more so a cautionary tale for games being made in the future, that if you're going to have a dash block, which, does not have any of the weaknesses of the other message of transport, this is the only thing that you can block out of. I think that, some heavy consideration is going to need to be taken as to how these characters act, because something I almost forgot to mention was the fact that they gave Axel Tornado. This move, to me, is basically Arc System Works almost admitting that this character doesn't fit in with a game that has dash block, because none of Axel's moves, none of his legacy moves cover multiple angles like this, and that's supposed to be like the gimmick of playing Axel. You have to, as the offender, you have to take a guess as to where he's going to strike and then move in that same space. This covers 2 options at the same time: jump and regular approach. And I don't exactly know how to use this move to the best of its abilities, admittedly enough, but this feels like a move that's supposed to bait people into, stupidly approaching you, and then you can kind of get them from there. But considering the fact that it covers both walking and jumps, that, at least to me, goes against Axel's design, which he has carried now for technically 3 games, a lot more if you count their different additions that they've been added on to for years to come. But, that is what it is, I suppose. But with that being said, I did come up with a handful of things, a handful of changes to the dash macro if, a hypothetical Guilty Gear Strive 2 is in the cards, or whatever ArcSys wants to do in the future to make sure that this thing isn't as annoying to play around as is. So the first thing is make the person who wants to dash forward actually have to hold forward. That way that there is some kind of risk with the that way that the person who is dashing forward is at least putting themselves in some kind of risk, because this is far too strong on its own. And again, if you don't believe me, watch Leo gameplay. This is mostly what he's doing in neutral pre-season 4. Another thing is just specifically for the dash macro to add startup to it, similar to like how Susanoo has startup on his dash in BlazBlue, but for the regular input, just keep it as, you know, frame 1 dash as it always is. Again, just to discourage people from dashing forward. I don't think that one specifically is going to hold water, but nevertheless, it was something that came to mind. Well, another thing that came to mind was remove dash macro entirely, but that's a different train of thought. So something that I think is a much more healthy way of going about this is to make the game high-low instead of strike-throw, because high-lows, it's a lot, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not as taxing, I guess, for lack of a better term, when you're having to deal with frame traps that, you know, don't frame traps. If we get the opponent to start guessing or reacting rather between your highs and lows, then this problem goes away entirely, and, you know, a person can dash block till the cows come home. Potentially that is the solution, but I'm not a game designer, so I don't know what potential issues can come from something like that. And in addition to that, generally speaking, I think that the devs, at least for Guilty Gear Strive, wanted to make overheads less powerful, which is why you're negative after landing a dust. Or like how this is no longer plus in this game. It's now -3, which, yeah, kind of fits in line with every other change in the game, but also highlights how only specific overheads get really that much play, for lack of a better term. In addition to that, you can also add in a lockout window for when, you know, a person can block. Potentially, this can be solved by FD, but with that being said, that would also defeat the purpose of that. Anyways, again, the point of this video was not so much to me saying that we should get rid of this in Strive, and more so that Strive should be an example of how, you know, what not to do, because again, this affects every character. I just use Axel because he's the character I played it with the most. And also is the one who feels the effects of dash blocking the most, I want to say. But this affects characters like Soul and Kai to varying degrees, because Soul can put you in 50-50s, while Kai, for the most part, relies on strike throw. With that being said, thank you for watching, and I don't know, if you have any kind of suggestions on how we can fix dash blocking in this game, leave them in the comments section below. That being said, thank you all, and I'll see you all next time. Until then.